Since the running back position took another L on Monday, figured who better to have my main man Michael Smith than you pod to win the game. Charles Robinson, Charles McDonald from Yahoo Sports, obviously plugged into all things NFL like few others around the country. Guys, I got to be honest, like, and y'all know I'm pro-labor, and I'm all for players getting their paper. But C. Rob, starting with you, I'm watching, everybody tweet through it. I'm watching all the running backs rally. I'm watching them, march on the collective NFL office, and seem like they're about to stage a walkout or a boycott or something. But I'm like, I don't have much sympathy for them because I don't think there's some kind of grand conspiracy. I don't think there's something sinister going on here. This is just smart business on the part of teams, and frankly, it's nothing new. This is Bill Parcells saying don't draft a running back until the fourth round. This is running backs year after year, this year being the exception, not going in the first round, going in the second round at the earliest. This is running back by committee. All of this was inevitable, and frankly, it's the way teams should treat the position, Charles Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like group therapy right now on social media. We got all these dudes out here crying about, being devalued and we're important. And there's nobody out here saying running backs aren't important or that the running game isn't important. But I mean, the economics of the NFL, they are what they are, and it's always changing. I can remember when I started covering the league, I remember listening to a general manager once tell me about a very, very good offensive lineman, letting him go. Well, he's just a guard. I mean, that was a mentality in the NFL. Guards didn't mean shit. Centers didn't mean shit. There's always been players in the NFL. It's a roller coaster. It lives and breathes. It goes up and down, who are going to be valued, devalued. It'll change over time. And look, I'll just say this. I thought about this yesterday. What was the last NFL team that won a Super Bowl with a primary running back who you would consider like a top five guy, like a must-have centerpiece running back?
So Marshall Faulk just comes to mind, but it might have been somebody more recent. I don't know. But I would just.
Is it like 2013 Seahawks?
It would have been like Marshawn Lynch, right? It would have been when the Seahawks. I mean, and I'm talking about and Marshawn wasn't the best running back in football that year, but I think you would have put him, in the upper tier of that. But that's a while, okay? I mean, you're talking about basically 10 years since the last time an NFL team. And then now go down the list. I'll do this right now, actually, because I was doing this while we were prepping for this. Here's the rushing leaders. Okay, let's go down the list for the last however many years. Josh Jacobs, 2022.
Yeah.
Right, for Vegas. Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis. Derrick Henry, back-to-back years. Good Titans teams never sniffed the Super Bowl, right?
No.
Ezekiel Elliott in 2018, Kareem Hunt in 2017, Ezekiel Elliott again, Adrian Peterson, DeMarco Murray, LaShawn McCoy in 2013 for Philly, Adrian Peterson, Maurice Jones-Drew, Arian Foster, Chris Johnson, Adrian Peterson. I mean, LaDainian Tomlinson in 06 and 07.
And then conversely, look at the teams that have won the Super Bowl and who's their leading rusher and what they're investing in that position.
Right. It's a like the MVP award, and everybody complains about this. Everybody bitches. It's a quarterback award, right? Oh, it's a quarterback award. Only because it's a quarterback league. Okay. And when I did a piece on Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley weren't going to get their deals done, right? I talked to an agent who had done a lot of big running back deals, right? And he wanted to be anonymous as hell because he's got running back clients still. But he was like, he literally said about doing running back contracts, he said it's catching a falling knife. Like it's a shit situation. It's going to be bad. Doesn't matter how dominant your guy is or not. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said the league right now, it's about maximizing quarterbacks. You're paying quarterbacks all this money, and teams, general managers, head coaches, do not look at running backs as being quarterback maximizers the same way that they look at wide receivers being quarterback maximizers. And he's like, that's why you're seeing the salary scale flying in opposite directions. Wide receivers, we're talking number 1 wide receivers, number 2 wide receivers. And now typically the third wide receiver is a highly drafted asset. He said, you're seeing all the money in the assets pour into that position, and running back is the opposite. You're not seeing the money in the assets pour in that. If anything, it's becoming more of, a room, a committee, a rotation. And he said it has everything to do with the quarterback.
Charles McDonald, does your heart go out to these poor running backs who are putting their heart on the line, their heart and soul on the line, and not being appreciated? They're not being, where's the love? Fullbacks like, hey man, where y'all been all this time?
Well, we can get the fullbacks. That's just, running backs, they're putting it all on the line for the good of our country, right? They're out there in the trenches and really, really trying. Okay. There's 2 sides to look at it, because I feel like there's some people who will bring bad faith nonsense into it. Like, oh, well, why are you crying about these guys like getting millions of dollars? Like, that's not it. It's the facts relative. To me. Yeah, right. It's all relative. And I think the biggest thing for me is like, you're spending so much of your prime either playing for free in college or playing on a controlled rookie contract, that I think when you look at guys like Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs this year, and to Tony Pollard to a lesser extent, part of the problem is it's so hard for these guys to even hit free agency before it's time for them to, look at becoming like a backup running back later in their career. Because let's take Saquon Barkley, for example, right? He plays 3 years at Penn State, balls out. Obviously, whatever cash he's getting there is not equivalent to an NFL salary. He lucks out, ends up as a 2nd overall pick in his draft, which kind of makes him one of the highest paid running backs in the league right off the start. And as he's playing, the 4 or 5 years that he's locked into that contract with New York, the value of those running back contracts just keeps going down and down and down. So by the time that we're in this spot and he's able to think about hitting free agency, you're slapped with the franchise tag, which means you're still kind of stuck in the same spot that you were before. And we're dealing now with a franchise tag for running backs, which is $10 million, which is, it's nothing compared to the other positions. And you look at it from both sides. If you're a team, well, yeah, I think getting Saquon Barkley for 1 year at $10 million is a pretty good value. And you look at from the other side, if you're Saquon Barkley, you've already put all these miles on your body and quite literally kind of carried the Giants to playoffs last year. There's no way you can agree to sign and stay for 1 year, because you're playing a position where you don't know what it's going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now. You don't know if you're going to take a hit where your body could dissipate a little bit. So I feel for the guys. It's a tough situation, but I really think it's just like the inability to hit free agency that causes a lot of this strife.
Well, I'll tell you what it's going to look like a year from now for Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, and to a lesser extent Tony Pollard, who signed his tenure. Tender, I beg your pardon. Jacobs and Barkley are unsigned at the moment. 2005, Edgerrin James, he played on the tag, 404 touches. 2005, Sean Alexander played on the tag, 385 touches. And, of course, 2017, Le'Veon Bell on the tag, 406 touches. So what it's going to look like is if these dudes play on this one-year tag, they going to have another 400 touches of mileage on their bodies, and their value will only continue to decrease the older they get and the more wear and tear on their body. But honestly, this is why, hey, man, get your paper, do what you got to do, huff and puff, blow the house down, whatever it takes to get people's attention. But it's not going to change because, Charles, not only is it a quarterback-driven league, but you don't need a running back as much as you need a running game, and
right.
We've long since graduated from the days of having one workhorse running back. And even if teams feel like they have a workhorse running back, they go and they draft one. Hi, Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, for example. It's like nobody wants to. It's so crazy the amount of mixed messages because it's like, okay, we got a running back And if there's a lot of mileage on them, we're not going to pay them, but they're also not going to last. So let's go get multiple running backs to have specializations. Maybe it's a passing down back. Maybe it's a first and second down back. Maybe it's a guy that's better in pass pro. Maybe it's a guy that's better catching the ball. You know, it's like, oh, we don't want to draft running backs early, but you're the Atlanta Falcons and you have 1,000-yard running back that you hit on in the 5th round, and then you go take one in the top 10. It's like there's still a value for the position, but you're not putting sustained value into one guy over and over again. And I don't think there's any change in it, nor do I think it makes sense to change it if you're a team, Charles Robinson. It's proven to be smart business to draft running backs late, if at all. Right. You could even find them in the undrafted running back, as the case may be, and to not give them second and third contracts. It's harsh. And I think it was Matt Miller put this out yesterday, and the likes of Austin Eckler and Najee Harris, they all basically like converged on this one tweet about the obvious way that you handle running backs. Draft them late, run them into the ground, tag them, draft another one. Sorry, that's just the nature of the position. And if you don't like it, right, you might want to find another position earlier in your career.
It's the same reason why when you go to buy a car, you don't go buy a car from a rental car agency. Okay? You don't go to Hertz and go, yo, you got any cars for sale? I want to buy a car.
I actually did that once. Wait, quick sidebar. Okay. I had a Nissan Maxima that was a demo car and it had 5,000 miles on it already.
Those are the hardest 5,000 miles that were ever ridden in the history of cars. Because everybody beats the shit out of rental cars. You don't care. Right. Drive the hell out of those things. You drive over curbs. You do all kinds of crazy shit. You do not see a rental car that's got 15,000 miles on it. It does not look good, okay? Because people are not caring for it, okay? That's what the running backs. The NFL's a lifespan league, okay? All we do is we calculate how short NFL careers are. We all sitting here know the typical lifespan or prime for positions in the NFL. You know, wide receivers, you're going to time out after 32, okay? Yeah. Running backs, we know you start getting into your late 20s, the end is coming. Quarterbacks now, we're like, oh, you know what? The best ones, we can get these dudes to 40, okay?
Yeah.
Offensive linemen, you know, your early 30s, you know, but if you're elite, maybe you can go to your mid-30s, you know, and it all gets adjusted for injuries and different things that happen during the course of a career. But I think everybody knows running back is a short-time position because of the punishment in the NFL. No one wants to sink that second contract into running backs anymore because of the injury history. And look, with all due respect to Saquon Barkley, I know he wants his money, but I also know the Giants wanted him on the field when he couldn't be. And I understand that, you know, injuries happen. I'm not going to sit here and say players should go out and destroy themselves when they're injured and not be on the field. But you have to know when you're coming for that second contract, a team is sitting there looking at you thinking, what was your availability on the first contract? Well, geez, it's not great. So now we're going to sink long-term money into
not a good precursor for the next contract.
Yeah. Listen, honestly, Christian McCaffrey, lucky. He's lucky he got what he got in terms of the follow-up deals, all the money that he got after his first contract. Because when you would talk to other teams, all they would say about Christian McCaffrey prior to him being acquired from the Carolina Panthers by the 49ers, other teams were reticent. They're like, yeah, he's a great player when he's on the field, but how often is he going to be on the field? Like, he's always hurt. He's always a soft tissue injury away from you not having him for a couple of games or maybe a season. Like, who knows? It just gets factored in at the position. And I don't know, man. There's a lot of crying right now about what we all know the facts are, what's obvious. Okay. People are reacting to what is out there. What is naturally happening at the position? Are we just supposed to pretend that running backs all last 10 years? Are we just supposed to pretend that they're winning MVPs and they're, 2,400 yard, rushing and receiving guys anymore? No, that's not the league anymore.
But Charles McDonald, it's not just that. The supply far outweighs the demand in a league where, okay, Saquon Barkley, great running back. Josh Jacobs led the league in rushing, right? Tony Pollard, obviously, he's kind of on the back burner right now because he actually signed his tender, as we mentioned. But it's like, meanwhile, you got Dalvin Cook on the street. You got Ezekiel Elliott or whatever's left of him on the street. You got Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt chilling, and you have all these young running backs coming in, this influx coming in. It's like the harshest thing in the world because we've all been told this by executives or management at some time, and the shit sucks. But, you know, or either been told it explicitly or implicitly that there's a lot of people outside that will do your job in a second, right? Nowhere is that more true than with a running back. There's a whole bunch of dudes we can get to do this job. And here's the other part. There are so many coaches, specifically from that Kyle Shanahan tree, Mike McDaniel comes to mind, that feel like they can, and rightfully so, scheme a running game, Charles McDonald, around any running back and make them superstars in their system. That's the other thing that doesn't help this position.
Yeah, I think for those guys, it's true. Like if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I think one of the interesting things about him is like every couple of years he'll get infatuated with the running back in the draft that gets outperformed by an undrafted guy that he found, you know, just kind of sitting around on the street.
Right.
You know, the Joe Williams.
Don't get drafted in the third round by Kyle Shanahan.
Shanahan, it's over for you. It's over for you. But, you know, I think if you're one of those guys, Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, maybe Sean McVay to an extent, yeah, sure. Go out and get any running back. But what I would say to the Giants is I think this situation is a little bit different because of how your team is constructed. Because if I'm Saquon, I'm saying, okay, that quarterback you just paid $40 million to only threw 15 touchdowns last year. We all know who was the actual driving force of that offense. And when you look at the Giants and their percentage of big plays, almost none of them came from the passing game. They all came from the running game. I think when you have, it's hard to find these guys, right? Because when you look at the running back position, there's a lot of overlap, right? There's a lot of guys trying to make the NFL that are between, let's call it 5'9", 6'1", 180 pounds to 220 pounds. It's not really hard to find a guy in that body type. But when you have someone who's liable to go like 80 yards anytime to touch the ball, also big enough to hold up in pass protection, run between the tackles, I think that does change the math for you just a little bit. Because I was a little bit surprised that they played the hard ball with Saquon so much, because if you look at that team, where else is the scoring coming from? Where are the points coming from? It's not Daniel Jones wasn't the driving factor for that offense. A lot of the stuff he did, especially in the run game, was a benefactory of having Saquon Barkley next to him. So I think there are cases where there's outliers. The Raiders, it's like, whatever, you're so far behind the rest of the division. I'm not sure that having Josh Jacobs is moving the needle for you. But if you're a team that's in contention in trying to win the NFC East that made it to the divisional round last year, why would you not? Why would you handicap yourself in such a severe way? Which I actually think this is a huge problem for them if they don't have him back for the season.
Well, a couple of things you just said that brought some things to mind. One, talk about the evolution of the game being a quarterback league. It's not just a passing league, but so many more quarterbacks, including Daniel Jones, even if he was benefiting from Saquon Barkley's presence, are more a part of the running game. And for years now, the short passing game has been an extension, if not a replacement, for the running game in many respects, going back to the schematics. But Charles Robinson, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier about QB maximizers. And here's the part where I do cape up for the running backs a little bit and go back to that mixed messages point I mentioned about, oh, we don't value them, but, you know, even if we have a 1,000-yard rusher that we hit on the fifth round, we'll take, you know, a special guy like Bijan Robinson in the top 10, Jahmyr Gibbs for that matter. The one big knock on rookie running backs is whether or not they can pass protect early on. And really, that might be as important a role for a running back as there is in the NFL is pass protection. And so when you say quarterback maximizers, or people tell you that quarterback maximizers are not necessarily running backs the same way they are wide receivers, or for that matter, even tight ends, what happened to the old adage of a running back or running game is a quarterback's best friend, or having a running back who's proficient in pass pro being so critical, or a safety valve check down option? So why aren't running backs seen as quarterback maximizers in the way that wide receivers are, given all the dirty work that running backs have to do to keep the team on schedule?
Right. Because you can scheme for blocking, and you're not again, with the wealth of running backs that are available, you can find a running back who's proficient in pass pro, who doesn't have to cost you a ton of money. Okay. We're sitting here talking about Saquon Barkley and, the centerpiece he was for the Giants. Well, when the Giants got mollywopped by the Eagles in the playoffs, guess who the leading rusher was in that game? Kenneth Gainwell beat the brakes off of the Giants. Kenneth Gainwell.
Damn offensive line.
Kenneth Gainwell ain't out here getting some huge contract, okay? And as you said, you pointed at the offensive line. You can scheme and build it to protect a quarterback in a different and more lasting way. You build a strong offensive line, certain components of that line can last a long time, right? Running backs just aren't going to last a long time. That's just the way the position is ultimately built. And so, to me, when I say quarterback maximizer, and again, this is going off of an agent who's done this for years and years and talked to, general managers and head coaches about signing running backs. As money has gone through the roof and NFL offenses have changed for quarterbacks, protecting them more. The league, that's another thing too. The league has moved in a direction to protect what position? Quarterbacks.
Quarterback.
It has moved in what direction to enhance what position? Quarterbacks. Opening up offenses. More points being scored. Spread out offenses. All I hear is general managers complaining about, well, it's hard to draft offensive linemen because the college ranks, the way that college offensive linemen, they never put their hand down, in college anymore. We're always drafting just basically a bunch of pass protectors. And so that's what the NFL gets, is a ton of offensive linemen that are pass protectors. Well, it's all falling into the same trench. And that trench is the league being built around the guys who make the absolute most money, that are the rarest commodities, that are the hardest to find. And that's quarterbacks. And wide receivers are the most direct conduit to maximizing those players. And I'm not just saying number one wide receivers, as I said before, it's number two wide receivers. Michael Smith, you and I talked about it on the phone last night. It's your number three wide receiver. You go and you find someone in the first or second round because you want to have key assets at the third wide receiver position, because you want to then graduate that guy into one of your top two slots. You're constantly thinking about feeding who the quarterback's going to be throwing the ball to. It's just not the same mentality with running backs. So I just go back to us crying and, everybody's, we're all sitting here like, oh, why isn't it the way it used to be? I mean, it's just
deserves got nothing to do with it.
Ain't like it
deserves
used to be.
got
Nothing's
nothing
like
to do with it.
Nothing's like it used to be. Okay, get over it.
Right.
Like it's just changing.
Hey, listen, running backs say get no sympathy from journalists right about now. I'm going through the same thing. Everybody going through it in this day and age. Hey, thanks so much for kicking it with your main man, Michael Smith. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, but also subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Rate it, review it, tell your friends about it. Oh, and be sure to follow me on social media.